If this story shakes you, if it makes your blood run cold, hit subscribe, like the video, and tell me in the comments what you think justice really looks like. Because tonight's case from Louisiana will stay with you long after the screen goes dark. The sirens cut through the humid night air just after 9:17 p.m. Blue and red lights bounced violently off the quiet row of single-story homes in a small Louisiana parish outside Baton Rouge. Neighbors stood barefoot on their porches, arms folded tight against their chests, whispering. A sheriff's cruiser sat sideways across the narrow street, blocking traffic. Another unit idled in a driveway where the front door hung open. Inside that house, deputies found a woman lying motionless on the living room floor. Her name was Danielle Broussard. She was 42 years old. A nurse. A mother. And the estranged wife of a man who, according to state records, should have been locked inside a maximum security prison serving a life sentence. But he wasn't. Less than 2 hours earlier, Angola Prison had issued an emergency alert. An inmate was missing from a supervised maintenance crew assigned to an outer work zone. His name, Marcus Broussard. Convicted 12 years earlier of second-degree murder during a robbery, Marcus had been sentenced to life without parole. He was classified as high risk. Violent history. Disciplinary infractions. Documented threats against his wife during their divorce proceedings. And now, somehow, he was gone. The timeline would later reveal something terrifying. Danielle had called a friend at 8:41 p.m., whispering that someone was outside her house. She thought she heard gravel crunching under boots. She thought she saw a shadow near the kitchen window. The call ended abruptly. By 9:05 p.m., a neighbor reported hearing a scream. When deputies entered the home, there were signs of forced entry at the back door. Mud tracked across the tile floor. A shattered picture frame near the hallway. Danielle's phone lay on the couch, screen cracked, an unfinished text message glowing on the display. "He's here." There was no sign of Marcus. Within minutes, Louisiana State Police, parish deputies, and federal marshals were alerted. A life-sentenced inmate had escaped custody and was now suspected in the killing of his own wife. The manhunt began immediately. But to understand how this happened, investigators had to rewind 12 hours, back to the prison. At Louisiana State Penitentiary, better known as Angola, security is built around routine. Movement is controlled. Inmates are counted constantly. Layers of fencing and razor wires stretch for miles. Marcus had been assigned to a low-visibility maintenance detail, a supervised team repairing drainage along the outer perimeter, still inside secure grounds but beyond the main cell blocks. It was considered controlled labor, overseen by 2 corrections officers. At 2:13 p.m., a routine headcount showed all inmates present. At 3:47 p.m., one officer reported stepping away briefly to retrieve equipment from a storage shed. At 3:59 p.m., Marcus Broussard was no longer in sight. The initial assumption was simple: he had wandered off into nearby brush. But a ground search turned up something alarming: a discarded prison work shirt near a maintenance vehicle gate. And just beyond that gate, faint tire tracks in the dirt where a vehicle had briefly stopped. Security footage later revealed something worse. At 3:51 p.m., a white pickup truck approached a rarely used service entrance. The camera angle was partially obstructed by glare, but investigators could see the gate open, not forced, but unlocked. Marcus was seen running toward it. The truck door opened. He climbed in. The vehicle drove off. No alarms triggered for 12 full minutes. That 12-minute window would become the center of the investigation. Back in the quiet Louisiana neighborhood where Danielle lived, detectives began canvassing for witnesses. One neighbor, an elderly man named Robert Guidry, reported seeing a white pickup parked down the street around 8:30 p.m. He was sitting in it, Robert told deputies. Engine running. Lights off. Robert thought it was odd, but not enough to call police. Inside Danielle's home, crime scene technicians worked carefully. There were signs of a struggle but no prolonged chaos. It appeared fast. Targeted. Danielle had recently finalized divorce paperwork. According to court records, she had requested a protective order years earlier, claiming Marcus blamed her for cooperating with investigators during his original trial. Friends described their marriage as volatile long before his conviction. He was controlling, one coworker said. Jealous. He hated that she was building her own life. Detectives pulled prison call logs. Over the previous 6 months, Marcus had repeatedly attempted to contact Danielle despite restrictions. Several calls were blocked. One call, 2 weeks before the escape, lasted only 27 seconds before being disconnected. Investigators subpoenaed the recording. In it, Marcus's voice was calm, too calm. "You think a fence can keep me away?" he said. "You don't know what I'm capable of." The call ended there. By midnight, law enforcement agencies across southern Louisiana were searching wooded areas, highways, and rural backroads. Roadblocks went up. Helicopters scanned fields with thermal imaging. But Marcus seemed to have vanished. Then came the first real break. A gas station clerk in Ascension Parish reported a suspicious customer around 6:15 p.m., a man matching Marcus's description, wearing civilian clothes, buying bottled water and prepaid phone cards. The clerk remembered his eyes. "He looked like he was already somewhere else in his head," she said. Security footage confirmed it was him. He had been free for over 2 hours before reaching Danielle's home. The question now was who helped him, and why. At Angola, investigators began interviewing staff. One correctional officer, Deputy Warden Carl Hebert, noticed inconsistencies in the work detail logs. The officer assigned to Marcus's crew, Officer Landry, claimed the gate malfunctioned. But maintenance records showed no prior issues. When confronted, Landry appeared nervous. Sweating. Avoiding eye contact. Financial analysts pulled his bank statements. 3 days before the escape, a deposit of $18,000 had been made into an account belonging to Landry's brother-in-law. Untraceable source. And just like that, the escape was no longer just about revenge. It was about corruption. Back at Danielle's house, detectives made another discovery. Her security system had been disabled remotely at 7:58 p.m. using the correct access code. Only 2 people knew that code. Danielle and Marcus. But Marcus had been incarcerated for 12 years. Unless someone told him. Investigators searched Danielle's phone records again and found something chilling. An unknown number had called her at 7:54 p.m., 4 minutes before the system shut off. The call lasted 6 seconds. Not enough time for conversation. Just enough time for a code to be spoken. The number traced back to a prepaid phone purchased at the same gas station where Marcus was spotted. Which meant he had planned this. Carefully. Deliberately. This was not a crime of sudden rage. It was calculated. By dawn, authorities believed they were dealing with more than a desperate fugitive. They were chasing a man who had orchestrated his escape with precision, possibly with inside help, possibly with outside accomplices. Then came the moment that shifted the entire case. Forensics processed the mud tracks inside Danielle's house. The soil composition didn't match the grounds near her neighborhood. It matched Angola Prison's outer maintenance fields. Marcus had gone straight from prison to her house. No detours. No hesitation. But there was something else mixed in the soil, a fine grain of red clay not found at Angola. Red clay common in one specific rural parish about 40 miles east. And when investigators checked traffic cameras along that route, they found the white pickup again. This time, parked outside an abandoned farmhouse. At 10:32 p.m., hours after Danielle was found. When tactical teams raided the farmhouse at first light, they expected a standoff. Instead, they found it empty. Except for one thing. On a wooden table inside the dust-covered kitchen sat a folded sheet of paper. On it, in Danielle's handwriting, were 3 words. "I never betrayed." The message made no sense, unless Danielle had written it under pressure. Or unless she had discovered something before she died. Something about the original case. Something about Marcus's conviction. As detectives stared at that note in the silent farmhouse, one realization began to settle in. What if this wasn't just about revenge? What if Marcus believed Danielle had hidden something from him all along? And what if whatever she knew was now gone with him? Because Marcus Broussard was still out there. And possibly chasing something far more dangerous than freedom. And when investigators opened the farmhouse cellar door to search for additional evidence, what they found inside changed everything. The cellar door groaned as deputies pulled it open, the rusted hinges screaming against the quiet Louisiana morning. Flashlights cut through the darkness. The air below was damp, thick with the smell of earth and mildew. Wooden steps descended into a cramped underground space no bigger than a storage room. Dust floated in the beams of light as tactical officers moved down carefully, weapons drawn. What they found was not Marcus. It was something colder. Against the far wall stood a folding table covered in maps, detailed road maps of southern Louisiana, marked with red circles and handwritten notes. Several counties were highlighted. Highway exits were underlined. There were printed satellite images of rural properties, industrial sites, and one location circled repeatedly, an evidence storage warehouse operated by the parish court system. Beside the maps sat a small duffel bag. Inside it were civilian clothes, prepaid cell phones still in packaging, a stack of cash totaling $32,000, and a file folder. The file folder contained photocopies of Marcus Broussard's original trial transcripts. Highlighted sections. Margin notes. Angry scrawls. One line was circled over and over, testimony of Danielle Broussard. The officers exchanged glances. This wasn't a man hiding in panic. This was a man building toward something. Upstairs, detectives photographed every inch of the farmhouse. Tire impressions were cast in plaster. Fingerprints were lifted from the table and door handles. A half-empty water bottle was bagged for DNA. Then Deputy Warden Hebert made a call that shifted the investigation again. Officer Landry had confessed. Under pressure from internal affairs and confronted with the suspicious deposit, Landry broke. He admitted to unlocking the maintenance gate. He claimed he had been approached weeks earlier through an intermediary, a man he only knew as Reed. Reed had offered $50,000 in cash for a 12-minute window. Landry insisted he believed Marcus only wanted to disappear. He said he was going to Mexico, Landry told investigators, voice shaking. He said he just wanted out. But Landry couldn't explain the farmhouse, or the maps, or the marked warehouse. And he swore he had no idea Danielle would be involved. By noon, the manhunt expanded beyond a fugitive search. It was now a conspiracy investigation. Federal agents joined the task force. Financial records were traced. Surveillance footage from surrounding parishes was pulled. Every white pickup truck registered within 100 miles was flagged. Then came the autopsy report. Danielle's time of death was estimated between 8:55 and 9:02 p.m. But there was something unexpected. Under her fingernails, forensic techs recovered skin cells not only belonging to Marcus, but to a second, unidentified individual. The lab ran the DNA through state and federal databases. No immediate match, which meant someone else had been in that house. Someone who hadn't been identified yet. Detectives returned to Danielle's phone records, searching for anyone new in her orbit. They discovered she had met with a private investigator 2 weeks before her death, a retired state trooper named Calvin Morris. When questioned, Morris admitted Danielle had hired him quietly. She thought something was wrong with the original case, he said. She told me Marcus had been asking strange questions during their last legal correspondence. Questions about evidence that was never made public. What kind of evidence? Detectives asked. Morris hesitated. There was a witness who recanted years ago. A man named Julio Serrano. He claimed Marcus wasn't the shooter in the robbery that led to his life sentence. Said someone else pulled the trigger. That recantation never made it into a retrial. Because Serrano died in a car accident 3 days after filing the affidavit. The case had gone cold after that. Danielle had apparently begun digging again. And someone knew. Meanwhile, a break came from traffic cameras near the Mississippi border. The white pickup was spotted again around 1:14 a.m., heading east. State troopers set up checkpoints along Highway 61. At 3:26 a.m., a patrol unit spotted a vehicle matching the description parked behind a closed lumber yard. Officers approached cautiously. The truck was empty. Engine cold. Inside the cab were muddy footprints and a receipt from a bait shop purchased at 2:03 a.m. The receipt had a handwritten note on the back. Warehouse. 6 p.m. The Parish Evidence Warehouse. Investigators didn't wait. By 4:30 a.m., the warehouse was surrounded by deputies and federal agents. It was a nondescript concrete building storing archived case materials, everything from seized narcotics to old firearms and trial exhibits. If Marcus believed there was evidence that could clear him, this was where it would be. Or where it could disappear forever. A tactical team breached the side entrance. Inside, rows of metal shelving stretched into shadow. Boxes labeled with case numbers lined the aisles. They moved slowly, carefully. Then they heard it. A metallic clatter. Somewhere near the back. Officers shouted commands. No response. They advanced toward the noise and found a broken lock on a secured evidence cage. Inside, several boxes had been pulled down. One was labeled, State vs. Broussard, 2014. The contents were scattered across the floor. Photographs, ballistic reports, a handgun sealed in plastic. But one item was missing. The original bullet recovered from the victim in the 2014 robbery. The key piece that tied Marcus to the crime. Gone. As officers secured the building, a voice crackled over the radio. Gunshot heard. Rear alley. Two deputies sprinted outside. They found a man lying behind a dumpster, bleeding from a shoulder wound. It wasn't Marcus. It was Calvin Morris, the private investigator. Barely conscious, Morris gasped. He wasn't alone. I tried to stop them. Plural. Before losing consciousness, Morris whispered one more sentence. He said Danielle knew who really did it. Back inside the warehouse, investigators processed the scene. Security footage from the building's interior cameras revealed something chilling. At 5:52 p.m., just before closing the previous evening, a maintenance contractor entered the building using a legitimate badge. At 6:07 p.m., Marcus appeared from behind shelving, no longer wearing prison clothes. He wasn't surprised. He wasn't frantic. He walked directly to the evidence cage. The maintenance contractor disabled the alarm. They worked together. At 6:19 p.m., they exited through the rear. The contractor's identity was traced within hours. His name was Thomas Reed, the same name Officer Landry had mentioned. But Thomas Reed wasn't just a contractor. He was a former associate of Julio Serrano, the recanted witness who died years earlier. Financial records showed Reed had received large cash deposits over the past year from shell companies connected to a defunct trucking firm, the same firm once investigated in connection to the original robbery. A robbery that prosecutors said Marcus led. But what if Marcus hadn't been the mastermind? What if he had taken the fall? And what if Danielle had uncovered proof that someone else, someone still powerful, had orchestrated the crime 12 years ago? By late afternoon, the net tightened. Reed's vehicle was located abandoned near a swampy stretch of land outside Plaquemine. Blood was found in the passenger seat. 2 different blood types. One matched Reed. The other matched Marcus. Had they turned on each other? A K-9 unit picked up a trail leading into the marshland. As helicopters circled overhead, officers pushed through knee-deep water and thick reeds. Then a deputy shouted. They had found Reed. Face down in the mud. Alive, but barely. He had been shot once in the chest. Before being airlifted to a hospital, Reed muttered something that froze every investigator within earshot. It wasn't supposed to be her. She wasn't supposed to die. If Danielle wasn't the target, then who was? And why did Marcus steal the bullet from his own case? As night fell over Louisiana again, a new theory began forming inside the command center. Maybe Marcus hadn't escaped just to run. Maybe he escaped to rewrite the story of his conviction. Or to destroy it. But one question still loomed over everything. Where was he now? Because as investigators analyzed the stolen bullet's ballistic records, they discovered something impossible. The rifling marks on the original bullet never matched Marcus's registered firearm. The report had been amended 12 years ago. Quietly. And signed by a forensic analyst who had resigned abruptly months later. A forensic analyst who, according to new financial records, had recently received a large wire transfer from an offshore account. The same offshore account connected to the shell companies paying Thomas Reed. The case wasn't just about an escape. It was about corruption buried deep inside the justice system. And somewhere in the Louisiana wetlands, wounded but alive, was a man who might hold the final piece. But just before midnight, a call came into 911. A woman's voice, trembling. "I think he's here," she whispered. The address she gave wasn't random. It belonged to the retired forensic analyst who amended the ballistic report 12 years ago. And when deputies arrived, they found the front door wide open and blood on the porch steps. The porch light flickered against the humid Louisiana night, casting long, distorted shadows across the driveway of Dr. Alan Whitmore's home. Crickets hummed in the darkness. The front door swayed gently on its hinges. Deputies approached in formation, weapons raised. "Sheriff's office. Show me your hands." No response. Inside, the house smelled faintly of gunpowder and antiseptic. A lamp had been knocked over in the living room. Papers were scattered across the hardwood floor, bank statements, legal documents, printed emails. A trail of blood led from the entryway down the hall. They followed it to Whitmore's study. The forensic analyst lay slumped against his desk, pale, barely breathing. A gunshot wound marked his shoulder. His glasses were cracked. A revolver rested a few feet away, as if dropped in panic. Paramedics rushed in. Before losing consciousness, Whitmore grabbed Detective Lena Arnault's sleeve with surprising strength. "It wasn't Broussard," he rasped. "The bullet, it was switched." "By who?" Arnault demanded. Whitmore's eyes filled with something close to shame. "Orders came from above. The trucking firm, they owned everything." His grip weakened. Broussard found out. Outside, patrol units tightened the perimeter. A second set of bloody footprints had been found near the backyard fence, leading toward the tree line. Marcus was there. Injured, but moving. The K-9 units were deployed again, this time tracking through dense pine and cypress. Helicopters carved circles in the sky, their spotlights sweeping the swamp. An hour into the search, a deputy's radio crackled. Heat signature near the old drainage canal. Officers converged. Marcus Broussard was sitting against a fallen tree trunk, shirt soaked in blood from a shoulder wound. Mud streaked his face. His breathing was shallow but steady. He didn't run. He didn't raise a weapon. He simply looked up at the approaching lights. "It's over," he said quietly. He was taken into custody without resistance. Back at the command center, interrogators wasted no time. Marcus sat under fluorescent lights, hands cuffed to the table. His eyes were tired, not wild, not frantic. Focused. "You killed Danielle," one detective said flatly. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment. "I went there to warn her." "Warn her about what?" "They were going to silence her." He told them everything. The $50,000 bribe had been arranged not by him directly, but by Reed, funded through shell companies tied to Bayou Freight Logistics, the same trucking firm investigated years ago. That firm had been laundering money through staged robberies. One of those robberies had gone wrong, leaving a clerk dead. Marcus had been present that night, but he hadn't pulled the trigger. The shooter had been the trucking company's enforcer, Julio Serrano. When Serrano tried to recant years later, he died in what was ruled an accident. Marcus believed it was a message. Danielle had recently uncovered financial records linking Bayou Freight executives to Whitmore, the forensic analyst. Large consulting fees, paid shortly before the ballistic report was amended. She had called Marcus 2 days before the escape, her voice shaking. "I think you were framed," she had told him. That call had been monitored. Because Danielle's phone, investigators later confirmed, had been tapped illegally. Marcus escaped not to vanish, but to retrieve the original bullet from evidence and prove the mismatch himself. He needed it for independent testing. When he arrived at Danielle's house, Reed was already there. "She wasn't supposed to die," Marcus said again, echoing Reed's words. According to Marcus, Danielle confronted Reed in the living room. She threatened to expose everything, the bribery. If this story shakes you, if it makes your blood run cold, hit subscribe, like the video, and tell me in the comments what you think justice really looks like.